Good morning, Minister, Honorable Minister Edmund Hinkson, Minister of Home Affairs, Director Acting of the Barbados Met Services, Mr. Sabu Beth, Chief Medical Officer Acting, Dr. Anton Beth of the Ministry of Health and Wellness, staff of the Department of Emergency Management, members of the media, viewers and listeners, I welcome you to the 2020 Atlantic Hurricane Season Press Conference. My name is Carrie Hines. I'm the Director of the Department of Emergency Management. And it is a pleasure to have everyone here this morning to what has become an annual fixture on our calendar. This press conference kicks off not only the Department of Emergency Management's Hurricane Awareness Month of activities, but it really provides an opportunity for the Department of Emergency Management and our colleagues, such as the Barbados Met Service and other agencies of the National Emergency Management System, to address you on our disaster preparedness efforts. I also take this opportunity this morning to implore all persons, the public, to be more prepared than you were last hurricane season. You have seen the devastation that many events, these storms and the severe weather systems can cause. And while we cannot stop Mother Nature, we can definitely try to reduce our vulnerability to these systems. You need, therefore, to perform the required preparedness actions and your tasks prior to the start of the system. And you know what these preparedness actions are. Time and time again, we would indicate to persons that they need to have their emergency plans in place for themselves, for their families, their businesses. Try to ensure that you shore up your houses and you take the necessary precautions really to protect yourselves. Now, as disaster managers, we acknowledge that this year there's the added complexity that the COVID-19 environment brings and the implications for our emergency management mechanism and operations. We are ever more mindful of the health, safety, and well-being of our emergency responders and the public. Hence, the need for us at what we have been doing at the national level. We have been retooling and refining our plans and procedures under the guidance of the Ministry of Health, so that we can incorporate the considerations that a COVID-19 environment warrants. A large part of our efforts is to ensure that this information is disseminated to the public so that you can prepare yourselves accordingly. And hence the reason we are increasing the use of the various media platforms, the social media platforms, to push the information out there to the public. I would also like to encourage residents, communities to be prepared, take into consideration the various considerations of the COVID-19 environment. You can still effect your preparedness actions, but do it safely. I want to remind everyone that this is a whole of society approach, and we need to have unity of effort as we battle with not only COVID-19, but the hurricane season, which is upon us. With those brief remarks, I wish now to invite Mr. Sabu Best, the Director Acting of the Barbados Met Services, to give his 2020 prognosis for the Atlantic hurricane season. Mr. Best?
For the invitation. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. It's a very important meeting, press conference. I think it's really important that all Barbadians pay attention and listen to the advice that comes from the Department of Emergency Management. They've been awesome throughout the years, and we expect that it will continue to be awesome this year and years to come. Now, even though the conference is, this meeting is basically about the hurricane season, remember the hurricane season is also basically our rainy season. And so although a lot of the emphasis will be on the hurricanes, how many there would be and how devastating it would be, we need to remember that we actually suffer a lot from excess rainfall events here in Barbados, and that's something we also need to pay attention to. So, so let's dive right into it. So we prepared basically a prognosis for the Atlantic hurricane season for 2020. So the names for 2020 Atlantic hurricane season basically start with Arthur, Bertha, Cristobal. I'm not going to go through all the names. These are easily accessible on our website, or I mean anywhere basically, even by National Hurricane Center. Already we have 2 systems that's gone already for the year, and the season has not officially started. The season officially starts from June the 1st and ends November the 30th. But these things that happen sometimes before the season, you can easily have a system developing in May, and even outside of the season, there have been known times systems develop at the end of the season, December, sorry. So it's not uncommon. However, having 2 already is really kicking the season off to an incredible start. I'm going to go ahead and skip a few slides because 3 of them are a little technical. Maybe use if the media has certain questions. But let's dive right into the forecast. And so we basically pulled out forecasts from 4 centers, as you can see from the slide. There's one from Colorado State, Tropical Storm Risk, University of Arizona, and then there's NOAA. So on the left of the presentation here, you can see we have named storms, hurricanes, and major hurricanes, which are Category 3 or higher. And we also listed out the climatological average, which is from 1981 to 2010. And the average climatological average is for named storms each year is probably around 12. For hurricanes, 6 to 7 a year. And for major hurricanes, 2 to 3 a year, basically. So a little recap on 2019. We actually had 18 named storms, 6 hurricanes, and 3 majors. So it was a little bit above average. It was a little bit above average season, mainly because we actually have more storms. So I wanted to go back in time because I wanted to show you that even though the forecast was actually a little bit below what actually occurred, that's what it is. It's just a forecast, but it still provides a really good essential guide of what the season is going to be. So for 2020, Colorado State, or most of the agencies, rather all of them, are actually forecasting above average storms. All of them. But the highest being University of Arizona. When we actually review some forecasts from these centers over a 10-year period, we found that Colorado State tends to be the closest in terms of accuracy in their forecasts. So we lean a little bit more on the Colorado State forecast, which is, in this case here, 16. And so for hurricanes, the forecast, again, from every single center is actually above average as well, 6 to 7. All centers have above average, with Colorado State, again, having 8 hurricanes. And again, for major hurricanes, which are Category 3 or greater, all centers, again, are forecasting above average, which is interesting that NOAA has 5 and Colorado State is 4, which we lean heavily on. So these forecasts are really indicative of a really intense hurricane season that we are forecasting coming up. I should remind our viewers, listeners, that this is a forecast, and it can easily be more than this. And if it is more than this, it will be a catastrophic year. You don't have to have so many storms or hurricanes for it to be catastrophic. You just need one. Just one. One in a strategic location. A strategic path could cause significant damage and disruption to services to its entire hemisphere. We can take Dorian, for example, last year. That was a powerful hurricane, and it stalled over the northern Bahamas and wreaked havoc, and it disrupted the shipping lanes, etc. So even though we would see a system develop and passing north of Barbados, we don't worry, no need to be prepared. That wouldn't be very smart. We should always be prepared, regardless if it's direct or indirect. And most of the systems affect Barbados indirectly in some form or fashion. And in light of the COVID experience and the supplies not necessarily readily being available, it is really, really important that we be prepared. And in order to be resilient, preparedness is a strong component of that. When you're well prepared, your resilience goes up. So the question that most people like to ask us is, okay, so you're forecasting more, forecasting more storms and hurricanes. Why is that? What's causing that? What's responsible? Not getting too technical. One of the contributing factors is the above normal sea surface temperatures. That's just actually off the west coast of Africa. These systems tend to get or gain most of the energy from the oceans. And if there's more heat or higher temperatures in the oceans, then there's more fuel for these systems. And traditionally, on average, off the west coast of Africa, temperatures are pretty cold, or cool, I should say. And so systems tend to not really develop quickly as soon as they come off the coast. But if there's more energy available to them, then they can actually develop a lot sooner and quicker. So what are we going to do to improve what we do at the BMS, and even in conjunction with DEM? This year we'll be introducing, actually from June 1st, our BMS response and preparation plan. We're rolling out impact-based forecasting. This initially started about 2 to 3 years ago with CIMH, Caribbean Institute for Meteorology and Hydrology, along with USAID, where they joined forces with the BMS and DM and also Coastal Zone Management Unit to develop a set of matrices for impact-based forecasting. It was quite challenging to pull it all together. We've been able to do so within the last 6 months, put a lot more of it into motion, extensive testing within the last 4 months, and even the last few days. And we're quite pleased with what we've seen so far, and even from some of the reviews and from some of the beta testers. So basically, what is it? I mean, what is impact-based forecasting? So it's basically a timely dissemination of accurate and easily understandable forecast information. Evolution of forecast from, that's what it's going to be, an evolution of the forecast from what the weather will be to what the weather will do. And we'll be using basically a warning risk level matrices, which is what you see here on the right. So unlike traditional forecasts, what you see coming from the main office is mostly just text. And I mean, I can appreciate customers, viewers, and even our stakeholders having some difficulty in trying to understand what it means and what they should do. And so we're trying to really bridge that gap and help them to understand what's really going to be happening and what they should, how they should really respond to certain situations. And from a first glance, these colors should actually help. So on the bottom axis of this this box here, you can see it goes from green to orange. This is basically the severity of the impact. If it's very low, it's green. Moderate severity is yellow, and if it's high severity, it is actually orange. And on the vertical axis, we have the confidence, which starts from 0 to 20% and goes all the way to 80 and 100% to the top. So you can see if there's a high confidence in the forecast actually occurring and the severity is high, we actually go into a red, which is actually take action. If the confidence is low, like if the system is far off or the numerical models might not be in good agreement on the track or the path of the system, then our confidence might be low. And therefore, if the severity is high, then we're actually just going to be prepared. So it informs the users on two fronts here: severity and the confidence. And the end product will be what you should do, the alert level. There's going to be a lot of video tutorials on our website and on our YouTube page to help citizens and even stakeholders to understand how to interpret these products and the response messages and the impact messages as well. I know it's going to be a significant adjustment to what you're accustomed to seeing from the Met Office, but we really are confident that these new products will be more meaningful and more impactful for everyone and help build that resilience and understanding from everyone in Barbados. So what this is also going to include an update to the website. So it's going to break down each independent weather variables, which is going to indicate each associated risk level. So you're going to have an alert level for weather, wind, marine, dusties, heat indexes coming soon that's under construction, and then this severe thunderstorms. So again, not sure if you can see the colors clearly here, but in this case, it's just a snapshot from the page. Severe thunderstorms is green, means no action. Weather, be aware, is yellow. It's just letting you know to be aware of something coming up in the next 5 days. And wind is telling you be prepared. In the case for the hurricane season, storms, hurricanes, hurricane watch, hurricane warning, storm watch, storm warning. Those are wind events. Those are based on a wind hazard. And so in cases where there's a storm or hurricane that's impending or going to impact the island, then you will see the wind component elevated either yellow, orange, or red. The idea is when you actually click on these icons, it will take you into a lot more detail about the hazard, when to expect it, what to do, and I'm not going to go into any significant detail here where that's concerned. Again, you can find a lot of videos on our social media pages with respect to these products. What are we also going to be doing with DM? We're going to be having a platform that we worked on for the last 3 years. It's called Zamasu. What it enables us to do is to look at observations, basically real time, across the island from stations we have deployed. Have the ability also to overlay satellite imagery and even radar composite data. And so when we sit in the NEOC, we will be able to actually look at the data and help make our decisions. We really do believe it will be very informative and assisting the DM and the first responders on the ground. This platform is also going to be available to the public, so they feel free to toy and play around with it, and you can report back any issues or bugs, likes and dislikes. But it's like I said, it's something we worked on for the last 3 years. It's very exciting, and when we showed it to DM, they're very excited to actually start to implement something like this. There are also going to be upgrades to the way we disseminate the information, which includes the Common Alert Protocol, CAP. That's going to be a fully automated process in the background, unlike before where it was manual. We're also working with CZMU to provide geospatial data for the Encrypt platform, where again the emergency managers can actually use this data to help make decisions on the most significant or vulnerable areas to a particular hazard. This one is basically out of context, which was talking about the beacon, but I'm not going to go into that. Our main focus here is basically about the hurricane season forecast. We're going to stick there. So again, just a brief recap. We're looking at above average hurricane season. Above average. It's not the first time. I'm sure the impacts of climate change globally is not going to be the last. But what is important here is that we have to be prepared, because it doesn't take 5 or 4 major hurricanes. It only takes one, and it can set us back years. We can use lives, loved ones. It can be significant. And one way we can help mitigate that is not to blow away the hurricane and storms, but to be prepared. We have to be prepared. If you have any questions, I'm not sure. I'll be back to you, Kerry.
Dr. Best. Sorry, Mr. Best. I saw Dr. Best smiling at me. Probably have a premonition. Thank you so very much, Mr. Best, for your presentation. We will take the questions and answers after all the presentations this morning. So at this stage, I would like to invite Minister Hinkson to address the audience today.
Thank you, Director, of course, members of the two head tables and Deputy Permanent Secretary in Home Affairs who is here, and staff of the Department of Emergency Management and media. Thanks for coming to this annual session. Essentially, of course, we're looking at, as a nation, preparing for a hurricane season in the midst of a national, regional, and global health pandemic, which has confronted us and essentially taken up a significant percentage of our resources, financial, human, technical, and otherwise, in Barbados over the last 3 months. And the two issues can't be separated. We have to prepare for a hurricane season, which officially will be with us over the next 6 months, half of every year, in the midst of a health crisis, which has, of course, evolved into severe economic challenges, such that we have not seen over the last 70 years and 75 years, since the end of the Second World War, and certainly we have not seen within the lifetime of anyone in this room. But that is reality, and we have to deal with it as a nation, as a government, as community, as a family, and as individual people. Our country, of course, is a part of a region which is the second most vulnerable globally to natural disasters. Our region has experienced over 340 natural disasters since 1950, which have killed approximately 250,000 people, and affected adversely approximately another 25 million through injuries and through loss of homes. The economic impact of natural disasters has been phenomenal in the Caribbean region, exceeding $25 billion over the last 70 years, compared to about 25 billion, and I should say United States dollars, over the last 70 years, compared to about 65 billion US dollars globally. So in other words, the economic impact of natural disasters in our region has been about 1/3 of the economic impact of natural disasters globally over the last 70 years. And that is an extremely huge percentage, considering the size of our region in terms of the size of the world and our population numbers compared to the 7 billion or so globally. The economic cost of a natural disaster, the average natural disaster since 1950, was equivalent to about 13% of the gross domestic product of our individual countries. And you can compare that with the economic impact of natural disasters globally, or rather, as they affect larger states, being 1% of GDP. So, economic impact of natural disasters in our region is 13 times higher that of larger, more developed countries that obviously financially and economically can more deal with hurricanes and natural disasters than we can. The average natural disaster in our Caribbean region affects 10% of our people, whereas it affects 1% of the people of larger countries. These are frightening but real figures, and I say all of this to obviously show the significance and the seriousness of the situation which we confront on an annual basis for half of each year. In addition to this, of course, the scientific reality is that, as Mr. Best just said, we are experiencing significant change in climatic conditions globally with global warming of our seas, and this is a fact despite the unfortunate denial of this scientific reality by a few leaders of some of the most developed countries in the world. The fact is that within the last 10-15 years, we all know in this part of the world that our region has experienced some of the most severe and devastating hurricanes and storms in the history of the world. We in Barbados cannot just lie down and say that we're not preparing, that we do not have the financial or economic resources now, that 40,000 plus more of our people are now without a job and have sought relief from government financially, either in the form of unemployment benefits, welfare, mitigation, unit money. We have to prepare. We cannot take comfort in the fact, as a lot of us have said traditionally, that the Lord is a Bajan, because the Lord is also a Dominican, the Lord is also a Bahamian, and those two countries, of course, as we know, in 2017 and last year, suffered tremendous devastation. In the case of Dominica, 220% of their gross domestic product gone. And God is a Dominican and a Bahamian as much as he is a Barbadian. What I do know, and I've heard from the time I was young, is that the Lord helps those who help themselves. And we have to therefore prepare. We have no choice, COVID-19 or no COVID-19, but to do our best as a country at the level of our government, which we are doing and which we will continue to do, our governmental administration, our community, our family, and our individual persons, to prepare for any eventuality in terms of possibility of advent of hurricanes affecting Barbados and the wider region this year. As Mr. Best has said, all of the predictions are for an above average hurricane season. And of course, a forecast is just what it is, a forecast, but life is a question of averages, of possibilities and probabilities. And I would want us as a people to err on the side of caution and take it as predicted that this season will be higher in terms of velocity and strengths and numbers than the average hurricane season. And as Mr. Best has correctly said, you might have a list of 21 or so named storms so far this year. I remember one year where they might have had X number and they had to get more because there were more than the named storms at the start of the season. But no matter how many you have, it only takes one to completely wipe out a country, wipe out your housing stock, your economy, your infrastructure. And while no human being alive can prevent a hurricane coming to country in which they're living, you can do your best to try to lessen the adverse effects of that natural disaster and to obviously prepare for the aftermath of the disaster in terms of recovery. And therefore, since coming into office 2 years ago, certainly to the week, this political administration, of which I'm proud to be a part, has sought to have a more strategic approach to reducing the risk of devastation of our country from a hurricane or severe storm. We have sought to be more proactive rather than indulging in the retroactivity that may have besought some previous political administrations. We have, at the level of the Prime Minister Motley has sought to bring together the various stakeholders in government and create a more ready Barbados for hurricanes. I mean, the Department of Emergency Management, and a lot of Barbadians probably don't realize this, is understaffed, under-resourced. That is the reality of Barbados. Right now, 3 officers in the department, 2 consultants, of course other supporting staff at levels of, driver, clerical staff, but at the technical level, very under-resourced. That is the situation in our country in many government departments, and therefore we have realized this has to be a combined effort of all of our departments with resources, and not an effort alone of the Department of Emergency Management or the Ministry of Home Affairs. And therefore the Defense Force is key in this, and an officer from the Defense Force has been assigned within the last couple of years to the Department of Emergency Management to assist in the building of strategy, because this is what members of the Defense Force are trained to do in terms of managing and preparing for crises, situations, and challenges. The departments involved in the Ministry of Public Works and Environment, and of course Water Resources, and Transport and Works, and Agriculture, and of course People's Empowerment, all coming together at the urging of the Prime Minister, who has chaired certainly in 2018 and in last year most of these sessions where all the groups are together, and try to be proactive in our dealings. Within the last 8 days, we have had 3 sessions with various departments of government, preparing from basic stage, covering every angle for the eventuality of any possible hurricane or severe weather system confronting Barbados. The Attorney General, Minister Marshall, has chaired those sessions, of course, in which we've been involved. Health and water resources and transport and works, and education so far. Education, of course, being the ministry that has the overall mandate for the hurricane shelters. And we will possibly have 3 more sessions before we conclude this particular aspect of our preparation. No doubt the Prime Minister will obviously chair some sessions in the foreseeable future herself. So, as we all know, we are a country which has areas which are easily flood prone. After 5-10 minutes of heavy rainfall, they become hazardous, and some in my constituency, traditionally Trents, I could speak of. And we as a government have sought to, and we're ensuring, COVID or no COVID, because we have to find the resources that the gullies are cleared. That, for example, the Wim Gully, again in my constituency, which in the past has people have dumped. And look, I urge us Barbadians to cut out this habit of getting what you no longer need, your waste products, and you don't want them at your house, so you go and dump them somewhere else. This is a habit that, quite frankly, time is long since past that we get rid of as a people. You can't be, and I always contend this, say that you love Barbados, you're patriotic, you're nationalistic, you hold a Barbados flag on Independence Day, but yet you feel that you have the right to dump waste products, whatever it is, fridge, or appliance, stove, in a gully, and whatever else, because that obviously interferes with the water courses, the natural water courses, and has been the main reason, if not the only reason, why when you do that in the Wim, down in St. Peter, Spikestown, Gills Terrace, and other places, has flooded people's houses, water up to the roof. And certainly I recall that happened in 1984. It happened periodically otherwise since I think since in 2018 as well. Might have happened, certainly if not 2018, or I think it was 2016 it happened. And you would realize that in 2018 it didn't happen because we took a concerted effort. 2 weeks after we came into office, we went down in the Wim Gully. Minister of Environment, Minister Prescott, myself, and a weekend, we made sure that the Wim Gully was cleared. But we should not have had to do that because nobody has any right dumping a set of waste products in the Wim in the first place. But because of that effort, when Kurt passed in 2018, Spikestown was safe. And that is proactive. That's what I mean by proactive response by a government. We have sought to increase the generational capacity in terms of electrical supplies, water supplies. We know, though, that clearly if a storm or serious weather system is coming to Barbados, the electricity will be cut off at some stage. That will be communicated. And to protect, of course, the infrastructure of the Barbados light power and the electrical supplies. And we know that water is connected to electricity, so water will go off as well. We're aware of that. And we're all aware, of course, of the challenges which have confronted us within recent years in terms of supply of water resources to certain parts of the island, especially in the north and the east. But the reality is that, look, if where the system comes, we will be out without water and electricity for a while, certainly during the passage of that system, to come back on, hopefully, as soon as possible after the system passes as we can. We have sought to improve the infrastructure and the physical outlays of our hurricane shelters, the public hurricane shelters, most of which are schools, and which, of course, as I said, fall under the Ministry of Education, in terms of installation of water tanks at the schools that are hurricane shelters. Of course, this year, as every year, there's been a review of the hurricane shelters and an increase in the numbers. And last Saturday, we would have met Ministry of Health and Ministry of Education, Home Affairs, and Department of Emergency Management in terms of working out protocols for occupation of hurricane shelters, if it comes to that, in terms of whether we would want to waive the protocol of social distancing to some extent, because numbers and the challenges that we would have if you adhere fully to social distancing principles, and whether therefore we will have temperature testing of everyone coming into the shelter on coming in, so that those that may not be fully fit would be isolated in a different part. All of those issues we're working out now, and will shortly have resolved. The government, through the Department of Emergency Management, has improved our early warning systems and Met Office, and you've heard Mr. Best speak about that as well, in terms of the Met Office being involved in that as well, so that we can give earlier warning to Barbadians of any system that may be coming, so that you would know to increase your preparation. And of course, we've come a far way in this. I mean, certainly I was not around then, but I've heard about the 1955 hurricane, that the last direct hit of a Hurricane Janet on Barbados, whereby people didn't know that it was coming, and therefore high loss of lives and destruction of houses. With, as you know, instituted after many years a national shutdown, formal national shutdown and reactivation procedure, and we now have alerts coming to you on cell phones, the CAP alerts, which some thousands of people in Barbados have subscribed to. We have had the strengthening of district emergency organizations, the community groups, which assist in preparation at community level of plans and programs and strategies to help in terms of risk resilience of our people at that level. Right now, there are about 27. There are 27 of the 30 district emergency organizations which are functioning and which have membership. 2 years ago this time, there were only about 7 that had functionality. So these are, we've looked to command the equipment strategically, that we know where we can get tractors from, various pieces of equipment, which ministries, government departments have these pieces of equipment in the event of a hurricane, and obviously the aftermath in terms of transportation of people who might be cut off from other areas of Barbados in terms of clearing roadways. We've, of course, got formal MOUs with private sector, food retailers in terms of supply of food, which would be required in the aftermath of a severe weather system which affects Barbados. All of these we have sought to do at the level of government. Wider involvement of the private sector we've had in our efforts, as I said, both in terms of food supplies and adequate food supplies and clean-up equipment. And of course, I've certainly insisted on adherence to the law. Statutory requirements under the Emergency Management Act, Chapter 160A, are there. That act passed in 2007 gives the Director of the Department of Emergency Management tremendous statutory powers. A lot of people don't realize this. To get information and documentation and to require actions by permanent secretaries of all the ministries, and under that act, all the ministries and government departments, statutory boards should have a disaster management plan in place, separate and distinct from the national emergency plans. We've sought to ensure that this is done by these departments. That act also speaks towards having a list of the most vulnerable persons in the country, constituency by constituency. And in association with the Ministry of People's Empowerment and Elder Affairs, we have that list. Certainly 2 members of Parliament know who are the most vulnerable in their constituencies. I certainly know in mine. And, these are the people, elderly people living by themselves, people with disabilities, women who might have a lot of children, people in less than adequate housing facilities with susceptibility, which are susceptible to heavy rainfall and flooding. We have a list of those to ensure their safety and security in the event of a hurricane and try to go by them. This is where the DEOs come in, members, to perhaps try to assist them in moving out of their homes to a hurricane shelter before the event. And of course, in association with the Town and Country Planning Department, we have also sought to map out the most vulnerable flood-prone areas in Barbados. And this can be done scientifically, has been done scientifically as well, and try to ensure that the people in those areas are as safe as can be. But all of these efforts at governmental level can come to aught if at the individual, people's level, community level of families, individual households, there's no preparation and planning. Therefore, the overriding message here this morning, which Director Hines and Director Best as well spoke, and which I will continue, is that we as a people have to prepare. I know more than anyone else, perhaps. Certainly no one, in my opinion, knows more than I do, and other than my cabinet colleagues, my parliamentary colleagues, how much COVID-19 has impacted on our country as a whole. Because I'm a member of Parliament for the constituency which I suspect has been certainly one of the 3 most affected in terms of loss of jobs, because I represent a tourist belt constituency. And it seems to me that over half of my constituents, people who live in my constituency who had jobs today, don't have. This afternoon, as most weekends, I am out there in my constituency again, trying to sustain constituents in terms of food. Basic human survival now is what we're dealing with. So I understand the devastating effect that COVID-19 has had on our country, on our people. But we have to do our best, and I join in the urge to Barbadians today on the advent of a 6-month official hurricane season, with 2 storms already having been in the region, to do your best, do the best you can in terms of preparing your household, your families, your communities for what will lie ahead of us. Everyone has to be involved in the planning and in terms of risk reduction and resilience. Every household must have a preparation plan in place. You must have a personal flood plan in place, whatever you want to call it. Knowing where, if a hurricane is coming, severe weather system, whether you're going to leave your house, who relative or friend you may go at, the hurricane shelter that is closest to you to go at. You know, we're looking to see too if we're going to have a hurricane shelter for let's say the elderly or for persons with disabilities exclusively. Last year, you would recall, there was a hurricane shelter where the homeless went in. Fortunately, now we have Kima Safi. It's a place in Price Street for the homeless. So you may not have to have that challenge this year. Everyone should know, look, if you're staying at home and your roof does go, what room you're going to go into. You know, it might have to be a bathroom, to tell you the truth, that you're going and be in. As was in the case 3 years ago in Dominica, a lot of people went in a bathroom as the most protected part of the house. These are issues that have to be worked out now at an individual household level, and which no government or politician or member of parliament can work out for you. You have that responsibility to yourself and to your family. You also have the responsibility to ensure that your personal property is secure. First, that your yard is clear of debris, garbage, right? So debus your property, that the wells, the drains around your property in your neighborhood are clear, because a government can't come and do all of that for you, you know. No ministry say it doesn't make sense bothering the member of parliament about that. Go tomorrow morning and make sure your wells, your drains are clear, and check them every week. You must also ensure, and you could get together with your neighbors to do. Your neighborhood is clear, your community is clear and safe. Because social distancing doesn't mean that that is prohibited at all, and in fact, you have the duty to do that. And this doesn't cost much, so I mean, there can't be an excuse of no COVID-19 and you don't have a job and therefore you can't do this. This doesn't cost much, and it's not worth the risk in terms of your life and your house being flooded out and your property being damaged, your bed soaked up, and all your house. Not worth it. I still have to tell those who can afford it in any way to make sure that your house is adequately insured. Look, the reality, I know that the majority of our, certainly chattel houses in Barbados, are not insured. You know, we know that house burns down, as happens, and 99% of the time, you see, house not insured, belongings inside not insured. You know, again, this is your personal responsibility to seek to do. And those who can do it, I'm again urging for the umpteenth time to ensure that this is done. Check your house insurance coverage, those who have, and make sure that it is adequate. Prepare possibly sandboxes in case you need sandbags to, you know, stop flood waters coming in your house. Have your legal documentation and other personal significant documentation secured in bags, or certainly have plans to do that, so that your title deeds don't get washed away, for instance, lost. Have your personal hurricane kits available, your medicine, adequate supply. We know that too large a percentage of our people suffer from a lot of non-communicable diseases, as Dr. Best, who is here, knows much better than I do. And hurricane or no hurricane, the reality is that if in the aftermath pharmacies can open for a few days, you still have to have your hypertension tablets or your diabetes tablets. So get them before the hurricane comes. Your torch light, your matches, you know, your rubber gloves, your boots, all of this is part of the preparation of our people for a hurricane season. Now, that is the responsibility of the individual and not of the government. So as I close, I urge Barbadians, look, as has been said, we will be fighting two national challenges: health challenge and possible hurricane challenge, natural disaster challenge in our country, in our region this year, both of which have severe economic repercussions on our people. And as Mr. Best said, look, even if Barbados isn't affected directly by a hurricane, we are part of a region, a CARICOM region, which is an undeniable fact. And if one of our sister countries is affected, experiences a direct hit, we will be affected, because we are all one in this region. And I end by just asking everyone to remember that the Dorian that devastated two islands in the Bahamas last year was the same Dorian that 6 days before passed just north of Barbados as a storm 40 miles an hour, developing into a 185 mile an hour plus hurricane within 6 days, and loitering over Bahamas for 3 whole days without moving. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister Hinkson, for those extensive remarks. We did note the challenging environment that we find ourselves in at this present time. Quite like the other speakers, the common thread really that preparedness is key. And we need to re-emphasize unity of effort at the individual level, at the family, community, and at the national level. We note that there's a need to refine our plans and operating procedures across the board. And we are doing so on an ongoing, continuous process of refining and developing and validating our plans and procedures. We heard today the need to encourage proactiveness, and there were a number of preparedness tips that I'm sure you have and that you will take into consideration while you go about your business. And I note today that we sought to give you an insight into the complexity of the National Emergency Management System, but also the complexity of emergency management as a whole. Mr. Best would have spoken to the above average season, the predictions of above average season. However, it only takes one. Hence, the need for us to be prepared at all times. And within this COVID environment, while it may be a different hazard that we are treating to at this current time, the response functions and the emergency support functions across hazards are very similar. The need for mass care, the need for sheltering, the need for the logistics information management, the need for coordination, the need for communication. Communication and coordination are vital in any operation, regardless of the hazard. It is important that we are all in this together and that we prepare ourselves. Prepare, hope for the best, and even if something happens, we know that we have prepared. I now take this opportunity to open the floor for any questions from the media. So questions, and the questions can be directed to all of our panelists, all of the persons on the head table.
Dr. Bass, what can you say about COVID-19 and this current environment of the hurricane season on the way?
Is this on? Yeah. So we would have heard a lot so far this morning about the intersect between preparedness for COVID-19 and the preparedness for the hurricane season. What we have done in the Ministry of Health and Wellness is collaborate with the Department of Emergency Management and other stakeholders where preparation is concerned. Meetings have started, and as Minister Hinkson indicated in his remarks, these meetings are going to continue in terms of the preparations that we have been putting in place in all the different systems. Just a couple comments that I would like to make in terms of the governance structure. For the last 4 months at the Ministry of Health and Wellness, we've had a Health Emergency Operations Center stood up. Predominantly health is nested within the Ministry of Health and Wellness, but we have representation from DEM. So that's just one example in terms of the governance structure that is required for us to prepare effectively. And then in terms of the reciprocal arrangement, in the National Emergency Operations Center, there's a representation from the Ministry of Health as well. But that is, of course, just before a system strikes. Just a couple other comments I wanted to make in terms of what we have been doing in terms of preparation. In terms of persons in isolation, so those are patients, persons who are sick, those persons will remain in isolation facilities. In terms of persons in quarantine, so we have two different categories of persons in quarantine. We have those who are in their homes and those who are in quarantine facilities at this point, that's namely Paragon and the St. Lucie District Hospital. So those persons in the system will stay, those in the quarantine facilities. persons in their homes under home quarantine will only stay if they're not deemed vulnerable, because those persons have to write out a complete 14-day process from the point of exposure. And just as a reminder, those are persons who are not sick. We would have also heard this morning a little bit about shelter management. Shelter management is going to have a slightly different twist because of COVID-19. We factored in COVID-19 in terms of what we plan to mitigate in terms of the management of the shelters. For instance, when you come to a shelter, you have to be registered upon entry. So part of the registration process will entail a health screen. So you will be asked if you have any symptoms in keeping with COVID, whether it's shortness of breath, cough, upper respiratory tract symptoms, fever, and then some of the other unusual symptoms that are associated with COVID-19. And you will also have a temperature taken to determine if you are possibly suffering from COVID-19. And so you have the history and then that assessment as part of the registration process. Social distancing or physical distancing has also been factored into the capacity at the shelters, and then in terms of how you keep persons or families apart within the shelters. So those are some of the key strategies. I should have also mentioned the other measures that we constantly talk about on a daily basis, such as the hand hygiene, respiratory hygiene. Those are things that we want to ensure are maintained and practiced within the shelters. And we would have also heard from the director of DEM about isolation of persons who are ill. And that's a standard practice in terms of shelter management. Persons who are ill for whatever reason are usually isolated in the event that it's illness due to something that is contagious. And certainly in a COVID environment, that is something that is going to be high on the list in terms of differential diagnosis. We also recommend the use of fabric face coverings. So when you come to the shelter, you must have your fabric face covering on, and you must have a change of fabric face covering. So just two other things that we would recommend that you add to the list of things that you need to bring with you would be the fabric face coverings and hand sanitizer. Thank you.
Just to make sure, if someone arrives at the shelter with high temperature or anything, what's the actual protocol?
What is the
actual protocol? What's going to happen?
Okay. A little difficult to hear through a mask, so that's why I'm not speaking through one. I heard you though. So what happens is that person is isolated. If it is not feasible to get that person to a healthcare facility to be assessed and managed, the person will be admitted but isolated. And the same goes for if a person is already admitted, they came in, they were well upon entry, but then they became sick. There's always a section within the shelters for isolation.
Any other questions or queries? Do we have any online from our online?
I believe there's an assessment that's supposed to be done. From our very preliminary assessment, it is hurricane ready, but that's certainly in the plans in terms of readiness of all government facilities. So not just the isolation facilities, as I would have mentioned, but also the quarantine facilities.
That seems to be it. I think we were very comprehensive this morning in terms of our presentations. Thank you, Dr. Best, for answering those questions. I know persons are, COVID-19 is definitely a hot topic, and I know persons would have their concerns. Thank you for allaying their fears in terms of at least some of the planning considerations that we have put on the table and we've put in place to support any efforts during the season. Thank you all for participating this morning, and I would encourage you to prepare, and please stay safe as we embark on this hurricane season, as we together go through this COVID-19 scenario. Thank you.